Hi, and welcome to an episode of the Thoughtful Talent Show. I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching.
And I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting. And today we have two guests back with us. We have one returning and one new. I get the privilege of introducing our new guest. Kristen O'Shea is a fellow Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach. Through her business, O'Shea Strengths Coaching, she works with as a trainer and coach for organizations to leverage their greatest asset, their people. Kristen has her master's of education in positive coaching psychology. And as I already mentioned, she's Gallup certified. We also know her from our E to Grow coaching community. Kristen also serves as a state senator in her home state of Kansas. She owns and runs a retail business. And today she joins us from her neighborhood of Topeka, Kansas. Welcome, Kristen. Thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be here. Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Kristen. Yeah, it's so good to have you. And it's my honor to reintroduce you or bring back on the show Ron Cheshire. You might remember him from our futuristic episode because he was on for that one as well. Thanks for coming back, Ron. He is a leadership and team coach, author, co-founder of Co-Leadership Group. He believes in focusing on people and using their strengths to be more effective. He's been a Gallup-Certified Strengths Coach since 2017 and also holds coaching certifications in from Ericsson International ICF, which is he's a PCC coach, and E to Grow, so part of our E to Grow community as well. Ron is a certified coaching ourselves facilitator and skilled in leading co-development action learning groups. In addition to his professional pursuits, Ron has a deep passion for sports, especially soccer, and has been a team coach for many years. Welcome back, Ron.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
Yes,
nice
absolutely.
to see you all again.
And Ron, where are you coming in from? Remind me.
I'm coming in from Montreal, Canada.
Ah, wonderful. Ah, yes, my northern neighbor.
Yes, right. Well, and I'm so glad to have you both here. So today we're going to be focusing on the CliftonStrengths talent theme of discipline. I teased that I'm going to gush all about this one because it is my strengths envy. It is the one I wish I had up high. So remind me, where does this fall for you, Ron? Where does it fall in your top 5? Your number five? Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Right.
And Kristen?
Number 2.
Number 2, fantastic. Okay, so we have the experts here because Chad, where is this for you?
This is actually my number 6, and I'm becoming more and more familiar with it. But I'm really thrilled that we've got 2 people that live this in their top 5. So I'm also hoping I can glean some insights on how I can better utilize my discipline.
Oh, I love that at 6. Yeah, I'm so envious. It is 31 for me. So this is that talent I always look for in others to help me make sure I get to where I want to go. But we can talk about more of that later in a minute. Chad, do you want to start us off with that short description from Gallup about discipline?
Yes. So Gallup defines this talent theme in its short version as follows. People exceptionally talented in the discipline theme enjoy routine and structure. Their world is best described by the order they create. And so that's the short version. We know from being coaches and people that we coach that there's a lot more depth to this theme than that. So to start us off, I'd like to ask our guests, Kristen, I'm going to come to you first with this question. Just think about your discipline theme, not think about all the other wonderful themes that interact with it. But if you sort of separate discipline out on its own, I'm curious if you could give us a couple examples of sort of how does this show up? Where does it maybe display itself in your life? Yeah, talk us through what this theme looks like when it comes up to play.
Okay, thank you for asking. So definitely lots of planning of appointments, planning of my time, planning of my energy, planning of my family's resources. So I think about a lot of resources and thinking around, and it's usually aimed at efficiency. So what will allow me to get the most done in managing those resources? So an example, in college, I never pulled an all-nighter because, and I thought for people who did, I thought, well, that's just a mismanagement of time. Like you can always get something done without having to lose good sleep. So for me, it comes down to that planning. There's also the piece around like physical things, like everything has a spot or everything has a place. And so for me, it's not so much that everything's perfectly organized, but it's like you never leave keys in a different spot, right? You have it's got some of those routine pieces where things always have their place, or there's always a best way, best, most efficient way to do something. And so that's the process that we and everyone else should follow.
Okay. All right.
I love it.
Ron, I noticed you nodding right along with a big smile on your face. I'm sensing that maybe some things resonate here. Talk to me about how does your discipline come out? Similar or maybe even different than Kristen's?
No, it's quite similar, actually. It's getting things done in the most effective way possible is for me, my discipline. Like Kristen, I like to plan. I like to schedule things. You know, and you brought up a good point, Kristen, that it's spatially aware kind of discipline, but also process-oriented discipline. I think that's how Gallup likes to describe it. And for me, it's both as well. So yeah, I like to make sure things run on time, make efficiently, and do things, prepare things before deadlines. So on the other flip side, I don't like clutter, and I don't like surprises, and I love completing work before deadlines. So that's kind of how it shows up for me.
Fascinating. I love it already. I wanted just bring up something that's hitting me as both of you are talking. Just a real quick comparison about, I don't know where a ranger falls, but a lot of things you're mentioning hit me as some of the same similar topics that we talked about during our ranger episode about, efficiencies. I'm just wondering, is a ranger in your top 5, top 10, maybe top 15? But do you see differences in discipline versus that a ranger? Because that is also about sort of putting things in optimal order, or using, to use your words, Kristen, that the utilization of resources. I know both of these themes, a ranger and discipline, fall within the executing domain that is defined. But I'm just wondering, do you see differences, or would you push them apart slightly differently? I don't know who wants to pick that question up, but I wanted to put it on the table for either of you to
I'll jump
address.
in. I think a ranger has a little more ability to handle that chaos, where discipline's like, squash it. Like, let's not have so many balls juggling in the air. It's just a little less into the chaos around that. A little less flexible. But that's sometimes what's needed, right? Or what's most helpful. But Ron, I'd be curious what you have to say too.
Yeah, I have a ranger. I think it's number 7. And I would echo what you said, Kristen. That's the ranger helps me bring flexibility to the discipline.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, that's how I feel.
Oh, what a great question, Chad. I'm glad that you brought the ranger episode back up, because I was thinking, I'm like, yeah, this does sound a lot like a ranger, but yeah, that chaos piece of it, the rangers seem to love that and thrive on like being able to make the order out of those things, where it sounds like discipline doesn't necessarily want the chaos to have to fix. They want the systems in place to keep chaos from happening. Am I getting that right?
Right. A little less tolerance for all the chaos.
Yeah.
That's
Predictability
awesome.
is for us, predictability is very, very important.
Yes.
Yeah, so good.
Okay.
Well, we know our strengths, like they have good and bad sides to them. We can overuse them and they can kind of get in our way. And a lot of that is what I learned about mine when I first got them, is that they were working great for me, maybe not so great for those around me having to work with me. So knowing this about ourselves, and I think it's good for our listeners and people who might be interacting with this show is to understand a little bit about some of the challenges, even you as coaches, like knowing what we know about our talents, we still can get tripped up. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a little bit of some of those places where discipline may have gotten in your way. Ron, I'm going to come to you first on this one, where it maybe has gotten in your way or maybe caused some uncomfortableness or things you're even still working on with your discipline talent.
Yeah, sure. Well, routines are not for everyone. So even people with discipline, right? We've learned that some people don't like routines, and even if they have discipline. In delegating, I kind of have to keep in mind that others won't follow my routine unless it's a fit for them. Like kind of echoing what you were saying there. Not everything is based on logic, although as a discipline, I wish it was. But and then I have to be aware that looking to be orderly and precise and efficient, those aren't really words that you associate or closely associate with being creative and innovation. And so if I want to be creative and innovative, I have to kind of dial down my discipline. So, and then the last thing I would say is that for me, the challenge is working from a blank page. So when I'm looking, and I have futuristic, you can hear looking towards developing something, I already know that there's going to be a period of uncomfort for me at the start until there's some sort of framework or detailed plan and timeline. For then I become more comfortable in the process. But I know that I just have to be patient and wait for that to transpire.
Oh, these are great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I wanted to go back to the one that you said about that if you want to be creative, you have to dial down your discipline. What does that look like? What can you share with us a little bit about what that process for you is like, having to dial it down? What do you lean into then if you need to dial it down?
Yeah, I lean more into some of the other strengths that I have, such as strategic. For me, I dial that up if I'm going into something where I have to create.
So is that uncomfortable in a brainstorming meeting? Am I getting that? That's where some of that uncomfortability with discipline is coming out.
Well, if I'm on autopilot and not acting intentionally, yes, yeah, absolutely. It doesn't serve me very well. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing. Kristen, how about you? Where does this struggle come for you?
Yeah, definitely. When I'm not in control of my schedule or my time or my to-dos, I feel like I'm stripped of my effectiveness.
Sure.
And I struggle to find those ways to be efficient. So it feels like it's not my best self. I struggle when there's a change in plans, because I've already thought it through. I've all those pieces. It feels, so if there's changes or unknowns, it feels a little bit more like doggy paddling, where I'm a lot more comfortable if we're following a plan or we had planned for it. I really like to be able to know what to anticipate and know what to expect. That counts for a lot. So if there's just a lot of unknowns, so I talk about my first, having my first baby, there was just maybe with someone with high discipline, an extra layer of stress there because you don't know what to plan for. When you said predictable, right? Yeah. The unexpected is just an extra layer of like, God, my discipline it can't be at its best right now. So that sometimes can get in my way. And I'm just aware that I can be a little more sensitive to big changes or big unknowns than some of the other people. And a certain amount of chaos or a certain amount of big life changes can tend to get overwhelming.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
As they do for everyone, but again, just maybe
a
a little
different
bit
level.
more of like, I'm not my best self right now.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what I'm hearing there, it's interesting because you're highlighting a couple things that I've always thought came from my deliberative, which is my number 2, and my responsibility, which happens to be my number 3 combo. And yet I mentioned, discipline is my number 6, and I am really appreciative of the language you're giving, because I thought it was coming from someplace, and now you're giving me a little bit more language about, oh, wait a minute, maybe it's coming from a discipline, because I like, I, in very similar fashion to what Ron was mentioning, and Kristen, you talk about the unexpected or not knowing, but also that blank page of the openness and there's no structure yet, there's no framework yet. And so you can't plan for the unpredictability, because you don't even have something to hang upcoming things on. There's not even the framework, there's a blank page. So I really appreciate the two ties together. And
Yeah.
I guess I would just encourage people listening to this, like, if you're finding that you thought it was coming from maybe responsibility or something else, take a second look at this, because there's a real we're gonna get to the positive sides here in a second. I know that's where Jen wants to take us. But I really want to highlight that. Give yourself a second thought of, okay, where else could this be coming from? Because if you have that discipline, maybe is like me hiding, in your 6 through 10, maybe that's actually generating some of your thoughts. So anyway, without taking over, I want Jen to take us to our next question, because I'm really interested in the flip side of this.
Yeah. Oh, so I know from working with all these people who are close to me, all of them, be that my husband, my co-host Chad, with his discipline at 6, and everyone I work with, when I have a really great working relationship, it's because they've had discipline in their top 5. So it's part of what I've loved about the strength itself, is just the order that you create that makes my talents be able to really shine and just keep moving forward, knowing that the rails are already there, the structure is already created, I can just follow it and go. It's part of the reason why I love Eat to Grow. So on that note, I really want to talk about these ways that you have seen your discipline just catapult you in life. I know they all blend together, but if you could separate discipline to just talk about how discipline has done really well for you. I really want to know where that just makes you shine. Ron, I'm going to come to you again first.
Sure. Discipline allows me to be more intentional. It allows me to reflect and prepare before I move into action. So in my coaching, it allows me to prepare and reflect before any coaching session with my clients. So I'm aware and prepare so that I'm in the correct posture or coaching position. It increases predictability for me. It diminishes surprises. And when I look at it with Relator, and I know you don't want me to combine them at this point in time, but it also allows me to ensure my relationships are continuously nurtured, because I schedule the time with my family, my friends.
There's
And
that
so,
intention. Yeah.
So it's that intention that I put together with using my discipline.
Yeah. Kristen, I saw you nodding and smiling along with so much of those. Is it similar for you? You have other ways too?
Yes. Yeah. The more I can plan and anticipate what's coming, the better prepared I can be, the more effective I can be, the more efficient. So I've always felt a little bit like I can get more things done in my day than most other people. Not to be bragging, but that these are our superpowers, right? And so it's like somehow I can naturally see those next steps, estimation of how much time things might take, the time frames. Those things have always come when I think about time management or energy management. That's always come really natural. I think there's also a little piece of this that's a bit of intrinsic motivation, self-starter, determination, willpower, that just is that drive to get things done or think ahead, or kind of to be that opposite of a procrastinator. It's ahead of the gun in terms of the planning so that things can be the best and most efficient.
Oh, So love this. And again, very envious. And Ron asked me before too. So if I don't have discipline high and I don't have someone who I work with closely, like how am I keeping to that structure? And I really do think, like, not to make this about me and my stuff, but I mean, I have all these great, getting stuff done talents, but it's messy. The process is really messy. So the way I can keep that at least to a minimum as much as possible, I think I really lean on my maximizer and probably a little bit of my consistency too, to really help me get there. And then always that responsibility, making sure I can get it done on time. I unfortunately am the one who would be pulling those all-nighters, Kristen, because my process is not pretty. Chad, I know you want to talk about these blending of themes, which is what I just started us on. So you could lead us right in.
That's a wonderful. This is the wonderful part about this show, is that we get our guests going and they start talking about themes. I love that Ron's already brought up later. I want to build on your comments and Ron's comments and a little bit. Kristen, you're sharing some great stuff here, and I want to sort of expand it. So, we've had these first couple questions focus on sort of discipline unto itself, but we know as coaches and anybody that's spent any sort of time with Gallup's strengths-based development knows that our themes are never operating in silos. They're always pairing up. They're always either helping or balancing out the others. So in that vein, I wanted to ask, as you think about your discipline and going to use that, are there other themes that you regularly find yourself kind of pairing up with it, that it's its sidekick that goes and just makes it that much more effective? I mentioned my deliberative before. My deliberative and analytical can be really powerful when used properly, but they always seem to be pairing together. I'm curious if you have similar pairings for your discipline that supercharge it. Kristen, I'd like to start with you this time, and obviously, Ron, we want to hear your take on this too. Kristen, what parents do you get? What super talents do you go to?
Yeah, my favorite one, I think, is harmony. And I think it's what often maybe softens some of the edges on what could look a little rigid with discipline. But I've mentioned a couple times managing of resources, and I think that's a lot of harmony, right? It's especially when it comes to people or emotional or our energy resources. And so I think of efficiency of people, kind of that organizational development, like how are people going to be the most efficient to get what we want to get done. And so the discipline and then the people piece of, hey, this team has to get here. How's harmony going to help us all get there? I also think individualization. So we talked a little bit earlier, oftentimes discipline, sometimes it gets, and for some people it is, but the sameness, and it kind of can look a little like consistency. So for me, then having individualization high, consistency a little lower, I think it helps me to, there might be a structure, but the individualization helps me to say, everyone's different, or my day's different today, or who I'm meeting with is different. So it gives me a little bit of that flexibility or that valuing change and difference, when maybe discipline would prefer some of the sameness. And then I feel like having a lot of the other kind of purple talents, executing responsibly, focused, achiever, deliberative, they can all maybe kind of increase the intensity of it, but also allows me a lot of ability to act independently to get things done, right? So for me, that's been owning businesses. Like, I don't need a lot of outside, like, I'll just get up and do the work. And that's kind of that independence. I think those themes come alongside discipline to help it be successful.
Nice. And Chad, I love the way that you called it sidekick, especially because Kristen says it's her superpower. So I'm thinking of her other talents coming along like a sidekick. That was cute. Sorry.
That's all right. I actually want to come back to, I have a thought developing in my head that I want to come back to Kristen about, but I first want to hear what Ron has to say and what themes he goes to supercharge his discipline, because I think it might help me build out my thought a little bit. Ron, what themes do you go to?
Arranger, as I mentioned before, brings me flexibility. Strategic helps me be more open to mid-course corrections. As you know, that's one of the needs of strategic. Self-assurance helps me balance the need of predictability. And then we touched on this before, relator helps me maintain those relationships because I intentionally schedule them in my calendar. So I would say those are the four examples of how I use the combination of pairs.
Yeah,
Nice.
fantastic. Yeah, so the thought I had coming, and I really appreciate, Ron, your take there with strategic and arranger and being a little bit more flexible, is what I've often had sort of perception about, and I've heard this from coaching clients that I've engaged with, is, they think discipline is, well, my day is always the same. It's always in the same order. And what I wanted to highlight is, Kristen, you mentioned the individualization theme, and then Ron, you mentioned your arranger and strategic, and that there can be a flexibility to this. It's just about sort of the pre-planning of it. So it's not like in the middle of your day, everything gets jumbled. That
Upheaval.
goes back to those sort of darker sides or negative impacts that we were talking about before. So I wanted to bring it up because I think it's a misperception. It's something that I wrestled with. Again, I was thinking a little bit more out of a responsibility place at first, but the more you're talking, I'm realizing it's my discipline. But I, like Kristen, have individualization at number 9, so it's relatively high. Definitely not within my top 5, but it's something that I've always had trouble with when people say, "Oh, well, you should time block all of your days pretty much the same way." I'm like, no, that's not that's not how life works. That's not how living works. And so I really appreciate you bringing that up for people that are listening to this, trying to understand their discipline and realizing that it doesn't have to be, a military grade,
Mhm.
structure of every day looks exactly the same. That there can be some flexibility and that you can lean on some other talents to help you manage that, or as both of them have said, kind of superpower, be flexible with it, but know that structure is going to be there. So I just really appreciate you bringing that idea up.
Thank you for sharing that, Chad, because I feel like that's a misconception too. So when I look at my day, right, you're like, not every day is the same by any means in my life, but every day is planned, right? And there are some aspects of it that don't change. I think that he mentioned something about routine type pieces. So I don't miss meals. I don't stay up super late, but it's not always 9 p.m. that I go to bed, right? But there are some of those pieces that I think discipline knows are so important to be able to be effective for the rest of the day, or like you said, time scheduled with family and friends. Like that those pieces are part of your day, but it doesn't always have to look the same.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, my discipline, you probably can imagine that for physical exercise, I have routines and I have an app for that. But rest is also part of the schedule, and same thing in the agenda during the day. Creativity and innovation is part of the schedule. So I look at my discipline as allowing me and freeing up the time for me to be creative and innovative. So a slightly different twist on it, I guess.
No,
Yeah. Oh, it's so
I really
good.
appreciate you sharing that, Ron.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that yourself, like you're almost self-contained. Kristen, you kind of touched on that a little bit about, kind of being in business for yourself and that you're really able to just take all of the things and do them yourself. You're not really leaning on a lot of other people. So I was curious a little bit about that. Like I'm a lot like that. And I feel like it comes from a place of wanting to control like what's going on around me. So I wondered if you guys could touch on that a little bit too. Kristen, you're already smiling big and nodding away. So if you wouldn't mind touching on that a little bit first.
There is that piece of control. When I have control, gosh, I've got good willpower. I've got good idea of what's going to happen. I can crank things out. But when I don't have control, that can just be challenging, or it can get in the way of other people. And that's not right. That's when you have to step back and remember that it's not all about that.
Yeah. Yeah, Ron, I see you nodding along. Did you have anything you wanted to add about the control piece? I was thinking specifically about, you were sharing with me before about your closet and having these routines and like control over, like maybe even specifically like what you're going to wear, helps to keep you on the track of like freeing yourself up, like you just said, freeing yourself up for those other creative times.
Yeah, yeah. Similarly to some people, yeah, I want to lower the cognitive overload in
Yeah.
early on my day. So when I was in business, I would wear white shirts or blue shirts, so that, blue suits, gray suits. And the only thing that would be creative would be the tie. So so to prepare and intentionally do that lowered my stress level, I guess, at the beginning of the day. So I was able to do other things. Yeah. So it's to do these small little things to be more efficient, effective, lower the decision making overload perhaps at the beginning of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so loving that, because I'm seeing that in so much of the people, like I said, of those that are closest to me, and these routines and things that they've put in place that make life easier for them. I didn't realize how much of that was actually happening and that it was coming out of discipline. So really appreciate you both sharing some of these different ways for us and our listeners.
So I want to take us. We've done a lot of great deep dive. I know there's some people that are listening to this and be like, boy, it's going to be a hard time remembering all this, trying to remember, sort of an entry point to this discipline theme. One could argue maybe we should do this question at the beginning, but discipline, this is the structure of this so far. I'm going to come to I want to ask you as fellow coaches, are there particular images or pop culture references or household items that you would encourage people to think about as sort of a token of this theme, or a great representation of this theme? I'm just wondering if we might be able to mention some entry points for people still just learning about this theme, or maybe they're listening to this because they've got a colleague that has this theme and they're trying to remember, okay, they've got this, I need to keep this image in mind. Ron, I'm going to come to you first. What image or household object might you suggest people think about when thinking about this theme?
Well, for me, it's a clock or a watch with precise gears, a Swiss-made watch, perhaps, that seamlessly works together to keep time and organized efficiency, synchronizing tasks and deadlines. So, for me, that's the image that comes to mind for me. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, I've got a couple.
Oh, okay. Discipline. She comes with a list.
Right. Like the planner calendar, of course. I think of an organized house, maybe Marie Kondo, checklist planning. I also think so much, we kind of discussed this earlier, but discipline allows a lot of freedom, right? So I'm one of those people that I can work from home, where some people really need that structure of the office, because I like to create the structures myself, right? And so I've seen this image of, and maybe it has to do with some other strengths too, but of butterflies breaking free out of a cage. And I feel like, oh, that's me. If someone puts a cage or puts that structure around me, it's like, no, I can handle myself. Like, I'll come back home at night. Like, let me create my own structure or control, because I've got this. And so yeah, driven by discipline to create my own structure and processes, knowing that it'll work.
Yeah. Nice.
Nice. Jen, do you have any that I know this is 31 for you, but I know that you've got a lot of people around you that have this.
Yes.
So I thought you might come with an image in mind or something.
Yeah, I do. And I'm going to kind of lean on Kristen's a little bit with the checklist. So my husband and I are full-time RVers. So we are nomadic, like literally moving every couple of weeks. And in order to, and I hear it now and see it very clearly, lessen the cognitive load of the days when we move, my husband has a checklist of everything that has to be done. And it doesn't have to be necessarily in that order, but everything that has to be done before we can hit the road safely. So we look at that list and check it every single time we are getting ready to leave, so that we know that we have everything taken care of. And I love, like I said, I love the structure that those with discipline around me bring to my life.
Nice.
Checklist.
Yeah, checklist, and that's great. I super relate to that one. My dad he's now retired, but he used to be an airline pilot, and all the I mean, airline pilots have checklists for everything. Engine fails, there's a checklist. Wheels won't come down, there's a checklist. So I'm just, that's why I was grinning really wide, because I was like, oh, I know this life. I've seen it in play. I've seen some of those manuals. To finish out the images, I'm gonna just contribute one other one. So I loved, I've had opportunities to travel in Europe, and I've always loved, particularly some of the German, the Swiss, the Austrians are also a bit this way, but the timetables and the structure on which the trains travel. You know, I'm also a huge fan of those, basically the big boards with the flipping tiles, and every time a new train comes in or a train has left, and they move everything up, you see all the tiles, but everything is listed out. You know, the platform, the time, and the like 7 major, biggest stops along the way, so you know you're getting on the right train. I've always loved that, so I guess that's something that resonates with me in terms of this discipline theme, that there's a very much a structure to how the trains travel. So hopefully our listeners get a little bit out of that, or they recognize it either in themselves or in somebody they work with.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to take us to our next question, which is really about working with those who have discipline high. So this is like really good for me, because it's the one that I deal with the most. Like, it's what I love about you with discipline. So I really wanted to talk about, like, as we think about how others might be able to interact with you or with others who have discipline. And we know discipline might show up a little differently for other people based on their blend of talents. But if we're thinking kind of directly around the discipline theme, what advice could you give to team leaders or peers of that person with discipline that will help them bring their best contribution out to the team? And Kristen, I want to start with you this time.
Yes. Okay. So I have a couple thoughts around this topic. I think they need really clear expectations, because there's something there about precision. And so I think so. Ron sent me this morning let's like some of the least likely pairings, and disciplines is the pairs ideation. And so it goes right along with what I was going to say next. Brainstorming meetings can be hard because, right, and for me, ideation's in the bottom 4. But it's kind of like, where are we going with this? It's not really practical. It's usually chaotic. And that serves a purpose at times. But I think they might need something to do during that brainstorming meeting. Hey, you write down every idea, right? Or just that something tangible to hang on to. Or maybe they're in the second brainstorming session, which includes, how would we actually plan these things? So having that parameter, or having them help maybe set parameters. They're good at creating that structure or that timeline or that plan. So help give them that authority to do that. And consider that they may not need to be told twice. Maybe let them run the agenda or create those follow-up steps, because they're already thinking about those details and how this fits into what's next.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah.
Great.
I know Ron, I want to hear from Ron. I just want to add one comment to Kristen, because you brought up something really beneficial about discipline in brainstorming meetings. One of the other places that I've actually found my discipline has helped some teams, but you need to be kind of invited to that role, is take the ideas and allow the person with discipline to organize them. Find that structure, like, and part of it's probably my analytical coming into that a little bit, like I find the patterns, but allow them to start defining, okay, these are the threads running through certain contributions. might just be another way to help bring out the discipline. So I just wanted to add that. I definitely want to hear what Ron has to say. I'm sure he's got some great additions too, but I wanted to add to what Kristen just said, because that's been a role I've been asked to do on occasion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chad.
To build on both of your comments, prioritization is important for these people. So you kind of don't want to kind of show up with a surprise to people that have discipline frequently, because they do have a need to prioritize. They do have a need to order things. So you have to allow them to do that. I would invite them to share their plans, share their routines and their detailed lists. Invite them to help others get organized. And I think you have to recognize in a way that not everyone has discipline. So allow them to, not necessarily focus on the process, but more, or the methods, more on the results. So I think those would be to be aware of what that person needs in terms of the discipline strength or discipline theme.
Yeah, I think you brought that up about the delegation before too, about like if you're delegating, you probably should, if you have discipline high, maybe back yourself out of the like being in charge of how they're going to do it, because probably working with me and my achiever and an activator, you're going to be like, what are you doing? Let me help you with this. It's part of the reason why I make those great relationships with those with discipline, because I feel like you guys can't really hold it to yourself. You really do see the inefficiencies in others and want to help them. I don't know if you feel that. Kristen, you're smiling and laughing. So it's something I just like had an aha moment. Like everyone has always tried to help me be disciplined. So maybe that's a thing.
Yeah, it's sad, but yeah, seeing those inefficiencies in others, again, it's the gift and the what makes it hard, right? And I'm specifically thinking, gosh, if you could hear from my husband right now, he'd tell you all about that. But yeah, you see how things could be more efficient or effective. And so maybe too, knowing that they have that and they want to share that, and it's not coming from a place of trying to attack other methods.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that. It's the motivation behind this is always good. Like the motivation of our strengths is always coming from a good place. Like we want others to be disciplined. We want them to be efficient and effective and get there easily and not struggle like me staying up all night like working on this. So yeah, thank you so much for reminding me about that motivation piece of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Really appreciate those thoughts, because
love it.
They do, as we've highlighted throughout the show, they do have this amazing superpower. You just kind of need to channel it in the right place and inviting them into certain places where they can do that. I think is a great, hopefully it will be a great aha for some team leaders that are listening to this, that are trying to invite people into that conversation and just not quite knowing how to do it. So thank you very much for highlighting that. As we, believe it or not, we've spent a wonderful hour with you. This has flown by us, and you've kept us right on schedule, as people with discipline would. As we round out the show about this wonderful discipline theme, I'm wondering if each of you could give us maybe 2 or 3 key takeaways. Maybe it's something that you really wanted to re-highlight from something you've already said, or maybe idea about discipline that we haven't necessarily addressed with our specific questions. But just as a way for people to really kind of cement these ideas in their head before leaving this episode. Ron, I'd like to come to you first. Kristen, I'd like to wrap with you and your 1 to 3 key takeaways. That'd be great. So Ron, what would you re-highlight either from the show or maybe some quick idea that you hadn't gotten to yet?
Well, I go back to intentionality. The being intentional, that's what the discipline theme helps me greatly to plan, prepare, reflect prior to taking action. And then secondly, I would say that you someone with discipline should seek out roles and responsibilities that are in a structured environment and predictable. And, not to take away from what Kristen has said, but if you can't find that, then you do that yourself. You go out and create a business for yourself, and that's and you are determined the environment that you operate in. So those would be the two things that I would suggest.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ron. Kristen?
I would summarize it as planning to be the most efficient and effective that you can be. Whether it's with ideas, processes, physical things, all across the board.
Okay. Wonderful. I love it. This one, I told them 1 to 3. They gave me 1 to 3. I love it.
I love it.
Follow the structure right to a T. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate, as I said at the beginning, this is my number 6. So I already have some live experience with this, but hearing from the two of you has just been so insightful. I really appreciate the summary points you just offered. I really hope our listeners are as appreciative and find them as helpful as we did. So I just, as we round out, and for our listeners, if you like this episode, we encourage you to leave a review, leave us a comment if you're engaging with us on LinkedIn, click on the subscribe buttons or follow buttons on whichever platform you follow us on. We're on Acast and YouTube. And yeah, if I just, again, thank you, and please engage with the conversation. If you're one of our listeners, Kristen and Ron and Ben and I would love to keep engaging with you.
Absolutely. And the way to get in touch with us is you can find all of our contact information, including Kristen's and Ron's, in the show notes below.
And so until next time, I'm Chad Ahern of Talent Teams Consulting, encouraging you to keep playing to your strengths.
And I'm Jen Werner of Jen Werner Coaching, encouraging you to be uniquely you.